Hi, I'm Ryan, and this is my course on Adobe Illustrator CC Basics for industrial designers. As we're focusing on the basics, we're still not into actually doing any work. I want to talk into a little bit more depth on the tools. Well, let me clarify. Last session 1.4, I did a tour of the entire Adobe Illustrator CC interface. I did show some of the tools in the toolbar on the left and showed a little bit about what each one does. This time I'm just going to focus on shortcut keys because in our class last night that came up as an issue, and I really wanted to clarify more of a how I remember the what the shortcut keys are. Maybe that'll help you, maybe not. So if you feel like you've got the shortcut keys down for the toolbar, and this is only the toolbar, so commands to bring up windows preference pane or changing settings and things like that, I'm not going to really focus on in this session, in this video. But I am going to do the toolbars along the side, the left side, where all of the tools that you're going to use in Adobe Illustrator CC. Again, I did upgrade to 2015. The previous video, 1.4, was an overview of the 2014 revision. And again, that was because I did it the same day of the new release. So there are some things that are changed. I'll go into detail next time I talk about each tool individually and show you examples. But this video, again, is just the shortcut keys that you'll need to know on the keyboard and how I remember them. So let's get started. So first, with the left toolbar where all of the tools are, as you can see in my version, and it may be reflected in your interface, mine is the single wide listing of all of the tools. Yours might be that way, or it may be 2 by 2, and I'll show you how to switch that. The little collapse and expand button right there on the toolbar, so just click that if you need to. I prefer the skinny and it goes a little longer, it fits my screen. I prefer that just because I like a lot more canvas area, a lot more workspace, and I can have a bigger artboard. I also do the same with my panels, and I will collapse them instead of having them fully expanded, and just pull out which pane or which panel I need, depending on what I'm using, and then hide it again. Just because, again, like I said, I've used Illustrator for 18 years, and so that's the workflow that I have. So first, let me draw some things on the screen, and I'll do that very quickly. We'll add a rectangle, change the fill, we'll add a star, also change the fill on that, do a circle, change that to a nice green color, and a polygon with no fill at all. Okay, I've got a bunch of objects on the screen, and let's get started. The first tool up there in the corner is the selection tool, and as you look, it says V. So V is for selection tool. That's kind of weird. Here's how I remember it. Remember that this Adobe Illustrator is working in vector graphics, and we are editing vector graphics, so V is for vector. So use the V key to grab the selection tool, and you will select all of your vectors on the screen. So there's a vector, there's a vector, there's a vector, there's a vector. V is for vector. If I need to get the selection tool, I'll simply hit the key of V. Okay, so moving right along, the next one is the direct selection tool. And the shortcut for the direct selection tool is A. Again, what in the world is going on there? A doesn't even sound like direct or selection. So here's how I remember it. This is how I remember it. A is for anchor. And when you are working in Illustrator and you have all of these vectors, the corner points of any vector are called an anchor. And I'll zoom in here so you can see that. I have my smart guides on, and my smart guides tell me that where an anchor is if I highlight over it. So anchor, 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 and anchor. A is for anchor. The direct selection tool is A. So again, A is for anchor. And the selection tool again was, sorry I can't hear you, that's the V is for vector for the selection tool. V is for vector, A is for anchor. So remember that. And then again, I'll go over each of the tools in depth in a later video. The next tool in our toolbar is the Magic Wand tool. And again, it's a little weird. Why? Well, there you go. Why is the Magic Wand tool why? And I'm being punny there, playing with the word. Why? Well, because it's magic. It's a magic wand. So when somebody, think of you, a 2-year-old coming up to ask you, why is that? Why did that happen? And the default, when you don't know and you wanna get out of the why, the endless why question, well, you say it's magic. And they can't come up with anything else after that. Once you say it's magic, woo, they understand magic. They just, So the Magic Wand tool is why. I'll select that, and I will click on an object, and it selects anything of that same attribute. So why is it the Magic Wand tool? Well, it's pretty magic. So there you go. The next tool is the Lasso tool. Again, has nothing to do with the letter Q, except go take a look at that a little closely. As you look at the icon for the Lasso tool, you're going to see that it kind of looks like a Q. And I think that was intentional. Good job, user interface people over at Adobe. The Q as the lasso, and as you look at it, it looks kind of like a Q. Next is the pen tool. P is for pen. Easy peasy, right? So we've got P for pen. And what do you do with the pen tool? You lay down points. That's another thing you could do, anchor points. So however you need to remember it, I'm just sharing how I remember. The curvature tool, I'm sorry, that's just one of those more difficult ones. It's the shift and that little key above your tab on your keyboard. It's not an apostrophe, it looks kind of like one. Let me go off again, and there we go. It's the if you want to just remember shift tilde, because it has that the curve in the icon. You can see that there. It looks like that shape. Maybe that's what you could do. I think I'll add that to my worksheet for my class that I'm teaching. And as you look at you're looking at it backwards from how I am because of the camera. So as you look at the shape of the tilde, it goes kind of a curve, and as you can see there on the screen in the icon as you're using it, it has that same curve shape. So look at that key on the keyboard. There you go. Shift tilde is the curvature tool because it looks like that key. So now we have a few that look like the key that they're using. Again, the lasso looks like a Q. The curvature tool looks like shift tilde. And I think I'll change that on my worksheet, even though officially when you hover over, it's got that weird, whatever that thing is, I don't even know, maybe a degree or a meter mark. Anyway, so I'm going to use the tilde in my instruction. If you want to remember it that way, feel free. I think that's a great thing to do. The next one, as we go down the list, is the type tool. And the type tool is T. That's pretty easy to remember. T for type, T for text, T for text box. Anything having to do with type or text, it's going to be easy to remember if you remember T for text or T for type. So that is that one. The next one, Adobe, you really make me mad on this one. Because as you look at the icon, it goes from the bottom right corner, or excuse me, the bottom left corner, up to the upper right corner, and you think, hey, let's find something on the keyboard that looks like that. Hey, the forward slash looks like that. Unfortunately, it's not the forward slash. Adobe, you've got it backwards. I suggest, if you care about listening to me, go ahead and change the direction of your line segment tool, because it matches a little better the backslash. So if we use the backslash to get the line segment tool, just remember, because Adobe is backwards, they've got this one backwards, so the backslash backwards line. All right, and I'll show you that as I hover over. It's got the line segment tool. You can see in the highlight that it's going the wrong direction of the icon. So I think they swung and missed on that one, but give them an A for effort. No, A for anchor. All right. Okay, so after the line segment tool on the toolbar, we see the rectangle tool, and I'll go select that. And as you hover over that, you see M. Now, why in the world would it be M? M and R for rectangle. Okay, so here's how I remember it. Now, let me caveat this by saying I've used Photoshop, and I've used Photoshop quite extensively since actually before Illustrator. And so the Photoshop square and rectangle selection tool is called the marquee tool. And it used to be that you would use the marquee tool to select something and then fill it with a color in Photoshop. So porting from Photoshop to Illustrator, you keep the same key, same shortcut key. Maybe that's how it made sense, or maybe it had something to do with the R was already taken for the rotation tool. Anyway, I remember it that way. Hopefully you can remember that the marquee is, what is a marquee? It's a big banner that you put in front of a show when you go to the movies, and you see the listing of what's playing tonight. That's on the marquee. When you go to a Broadway theater, who stars in the production is going to be on the marquee. So it's a rectangular shape. So remember that if that helps you. For me, it's coming over from Photoshop. So sorry, that's what I have. If you have a better suggestion for how to remember the M for the rectangle tool, go ahead and leave that in comments, or get a hold of me somehow, and maybe I can update this video for that. But that's how I remember it. M for the marquee tool, the rectangular tool, and that's just what I do. I'm going to pull out the marquee tool to the flyout menu and go down to the ellipse tool. And as you see, the ellipse tool, and this isn't for my class, this isn't on our quiz that we're doing. We are only doing the quiz of the toolbar and the default tools that are right there at the beginning. So also, for example, I could have done any of these tools from any of these pullouts, but I'm not going to. So instead, this is the only one in the video this video, well, this is not the only one. This is the first one in this video that I'm going to reference, just because I think you'll need to know it, and it's really important. And that again is the ellipse tool. And you see it's L. L is the shortcut key for ellipse tool, because L for ellipse, and you're going to make circles and ellipses, so L ellipse. Hopefully you can remember that. M again for marquee or rectangle tool. And I know in times past when I've tried to explain them, I will say L for circle, and that doesn't make any sense, but L for ellipse tool, and hopefully that'll help you to remember. Okay, the next one down from the ellipse tool and the rectangle tool is the paintbrush tool. And as you see, the paintbrush tool shortcut key is B. B for brush. That one should be fairly easy. I know it starts with a P. It's called the paintbrush tool, but if you remember that it's a brush that you're using, like a paintbrush, B for brush. Hopefully that helps. And when you use different options and settings in the paintbrush tool, you change brush size, brush stroke, and things like that. So if that'll help you, it's the paintbrush tool. A lot of the time I have just referred to it as the brush tool. I'm sorry, Adobe, that's just what I do. So that's how I remember it. B for paintbrush. The next tool is the pencil tool. And as you see, the pencil tool, the shortcut key for pencil tool is N. And okay, I think N was what you had to use because P for pen was already taken, and so it's pencil. It doesn't work the same as a brush, so it's a little different. So N for pencil, and how I remember that is when I was in third grade or whatever, and I would get my pencil and I would go sharpen it, and the teacher would not let me get a new pencil, or my mother would not let me get a new pencil unless it was down to a nub, just a teeny tiny little bit, just with the eraser and just barely enough that I could hold on to. So N is for nub. So pencil, you used it until it's down to a N for nub. So that's how I remember it. Sorry if it's a little corny, but that's what I'm doing. So we have our pencil that we've sharpened all the way down to a nub, N for nub. So pencil, N for nub. The next one is the eraser tool, and as you see, it says Shift E. So E was apparently already taken. Shift E for the eraser tool is, here's how I remember it. What does the eraser do? Well, it takes away, and it's kind of criminal. It's a shifty character. Shift E character. Get my pun? Okay, so Shift E for the eraser. And again, how that works is we will select an object here, and then we'll Shift E to select the eraser, and I'm going to take away from my shape. So there you have my Shift E eraser tool, Shift E, and there you go. That's how I remember the eraser tool. The next one is also in the eraser tool, and that is the scissors tool. And scissors tool, as you see, is cut as opposed to an S, because what do you do with scissors? You cut them, and so think of a cutting tool. So the scissors is C. Let me go back to something else and select the C, and then I can cut points on a line in my group or my object, and that's using the scissors, the cut function of the scissors tool. So that's C for cut, and backwards because you're looking at the screen and it's kind of a reflection of me. So C for cut for the scissors tool, Shift E for the erase tool, and then we'll keep moving down the line. We have the rotate tool, rotate for R, R for rotate. That should be fairly easy to remember, R for rotate. The next tool is a little weird to try and remember how to remember the shortcut. So it's on the flyout for the rotate tool, and as you take a look, it's the reflect tool. So R for rotate was already taken, so we have to have another option, and it's on the flyout as an option from the rotate tool. So maybe O for option. That's interesting. How do we remember O for reflect? Maybe you can think of a couple of things. When you look at a mirror and you see your reflection, you go, "Oh, don't I look fabulous?" or something like that. I don't know. Or maybe when you're looking in a reflecting pool and you drop a pebble, it starts making a bunch of O's. I'm stretching here. I really don't know how Adobe thought that O would be easily synonymous with the reflect tool. Maybe either of those two options, or when you look at an O, it's a perfect circle, so the reflection either vertically or horizontally or on a diagonal, it's always in the same reflection. It'll always look the same. I don't know. So O for the reflect tool, maybe that'll help you. Again, fortunately for my class, this tool and the cut tool, the scissors tool, are not going to be on our quiz, but I did want you to know where they are in case you need to use it. So that is the reflect tool. Again, it is an option for O on the rotate tool, or it is the same reflection on the O anyway around. Maybe that'll help you remember the O for the reflect tool. The next one is the scale tool, and scale for S. That one's pretty easy. S for scale, and so you scale with the S with the scale tool. Hopefully you can remember that one. We'll move on, and the next one is the width tool. Well, that one is kind of funny looking. It doesn't look like, excuse me, I moved my cursor. It doesn't look like shifted W. It doesn't look like maybe how it should. And as you look at the cursor itself, it actually looks like the curvature, the tilde on a curvature tool. So I don't think that's going to help us. That might confuse us even more. How about this? How about if you think of what the Shift W, what the width tool does, and in order to do that, let's grab a point here, or excuse me, a line segment. So it adjusts the width of a stroke, and maybe that's how you can remember it. It shifts the width of the stroke, so Shift W. Hopefully that'll be something that you can use to remember the Shift W width tool. And as you can see, I'm shifting the width of the stroke on my shift, or excuse me, on my width tool. Hopefully that will help you. All right, moving right along from the width tool, which we just saw, we have a flyout on the width tool to the warp tool. And let me scroll down a little bit so you can see that it is Shift R for the warp tool. And as you select that, you can see that it warps and shifts regular shapes into warped shapes. So Shift R for the regular, or to shift regular lines into warped lines. Or you could think of Star Trek, and Captain Kirk calls down to Scotty and says, "Give me warp 9, Scotty." And he says, "I can't give it any more power." And he rolls those R's, kind of a shifted R. Okay, it's Friday. maybe I'm gonna go a little overboard, but hey, so Shift R for the warp tool to shift the regular lines, or think of Scotty giving it warp 9 and shifting everything from the way it's supposed to be. Shift R for the warp tool. Okay, again, this one is not going to be on the quiz for my students, but it's something I think you should remember. The next one is the free transform tool. I'll highlight that, and the free transform tool is E. And as I've told my students, E for the free transform tool, because you are free to transform everything. So take a look here. I can change my size. I can do things like that. I can distort my perspective with the free transform tool, and it's pretty nifty. I can do all sorts of things as I am free to transform everything. E for the free transform tool. The next one is the shape builder tool, and that is Shift M. And how I remember the shape builder tool is I can select some shapes and shift them to, instead of having more than one shape, I can shift them from multiple shapes into a single shape. And let me just show you that right here. I'm going to select this hexagon and this circle at the same time, and with my shape builder tool, Shift M, I will select points together, and now I've got a new shape. I just use the Shift M shape builder tool. Hopefully that can help you remember. Shift M for the shape builder tool. All right, so that was the shape builder tool, and this next one is, again, not going to, actually the next two are not going to be on our quiz in my class. However, I do want to show them to you. We will probably not get to well, we may get to them because we're going to talk about shapes. However, it's a little bit more advanced, but we're gonna talk about it anyway. So the next one is over here on the flyout for the shape builder, and well, it's the live paint bucket tool. And how does the live paint bucket tool work? Well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to clear some things off my screen first to get to the point where we can show that. So let's speed that up here in just a second. All right, so the live paint bucket tool, the shortcut key for it is K. And again, this isn't on our quiz for my class, but I wanted you to know it. The K for bucket, you put your Kentucky Fried Chicken. It comes in a bucket. Okay, that was not a paid advertisement, but you know, think of the strong K sound in bucket, and that will help you remember K for live paint bucket. Or maybe you can come up with something better and send it to me in a comment or an email. However, as you look at my colors, I've got all these stars. They all have white fill on them and black stroke. I need a different color first, so let's go pick a color. I'm going to pick a nice pink color. So now I have my pink color, and the Live Paint Bucket tool is pretty awesome. If you click somewhere, it will pop up this box and say, here's how the Live Paint Bucket works. So it can tell you, it'll tell you, and it'll give you these instructions. So what you do first is you select a collection of paths, and then you click with the Live Paint Bucket to make a Live Paint group, and then you can paint areas between the paths. Make sense? Okay. So it's like coloring within the lines on a sheet of paper with your crayon. Actually, it's closer to the paint bucket function of, say, Photoshop or Microsoft Paint or any raster graphics programs. It doesn't really care about where the lines are, but in this case it's vector, so we can use it. So anyway, I'm going to close that and show you how that works. So we have our Live Paint Bucket tool active by hitting K for bucket on the keyboard. And first thing you need to do, like it said, is make a selection. So in order to select, you can't drag with the bucket. It'll give you that thing again unless you've clicked Don't Show Again. So how do we select these things? Well, this is part of the finger dance, and I've taught my class this one. This is a reminder, and we'll talk about the finger dance here fairly shortly. But for now, understand that you can either go to the selection tool by hitting V for vector, remember our selection tool, or there's another shortcut that's even faster, and it will help you get back to your bucket quickly. And that is part of the finger dance, and why it's so awesome is because I can select, or I can choose the selection tool, and then when I'm done with it, I come automatically back to the paint bucket. That's the finger dance, why it's so awesome. So what that is holding down the command button on a Mac or the control button on a PC, and you see my cursor change to the selection tool, as though I hit the V key, but I didn't. Again, I let go of it. It comes back to my Live Paint Bucket because that's the tool I have. And so hold down Control, Command on the Mac, and select our stars here. And as you can see, I let go. I'm back to the Paint Bucket tool, the Live Paint Bucket tool, and I have all of these shapes within. And when I hover over that selected shape, it says in red, let me get it somewhere where I can see it, click to make Live Paint Group. And so I will click that, and then the whole thing I can paint in there. And imagine these individual shapes within the intersections are individual vector shapes. Is what it did is it took all of the intersections and converted those into individual shapes, and then I can paint them with the Live Paint Bucket tool. That is the Live Paint Bucket. We'll go into greater detail later. Just know that the shortcut key for the Live Paint Bucket tool is K, for like your KFC chicken that you throw in there in your bucket. Or that they deliver you a bucket of chicken. Anyway, it's again Friday. All right. So that's the Live Paint Bucket tool. The next tool is the Live Paint Selection tool. Now, think of the L in Live Paint, and it's the selection. So think of shift. We're shifting things. We're selecting things further than with the other tools, and we'll show you what that does here. So a Live Paint Bucket selection, or Live Paint Selection tool, let me click off somewhere and get back to it. That's Shift L. And what it does is it can select individual lines within our Live Paint shape. And for example, this, where the intersection is inside the star, where this line select, and I could select that individual line and get rid of it, and now my shape is the whole area. Oops, there's another one there. Click that one. And so now my shape is this whole area without the intersections where the star behind it, how that shape, that live paint shape was formed. So Shift L for the live paint selection tool, and we are shifting what the selected, or what we can select with the live paint tool. Hopefully that makes a little sense for you. The next tool is the perspective grid tool, and you see it's Shift P because we are shifting our perspective with this tool. So Shift P for the shift perspective grid tool, or perspective grid tool to shift our perspective, and you click that and you see the perspective grid, and you can adjust all of those. We'll talk about that at another time. Just know where it is, and Shift P to shift your perspective with the perspective grid tool. So if you saw what I just did there, I just clicked the little button to hide the perspective grid. And so if you're thinking, hey, I need to see that back again, you click it, it doesn't show up. Well, what you need to do is just select another tool, for example, the selection tool, by hitting V, and then go back to Shift P to bring back the selection grid, or the perspective grid. And then we will talk about the next tool. Again, this next tool is not on our quiz, as was not the live paint selection tool, and it is the perspective selection tool by hitting Shift V. Think of your selection tool, but it's shifted. We are shifting and we're getting the perspective selection. So think about what the perspective selection tool does, and it will take our object and put it on that perspective, and we can select objects to put on that perspective. So select perspective tool is going to be selection tool with a shift. It's shifting our perspective. See if you can put those three together and make something out of it. If you have a better idea for Shift V as the perspective selection tool, let me know. And thanks for any input you can give me. All right, let's get on to the next one. I'm going to turn off my hide my grid. I'm going to actually undo my movement there of selecting and moving my stars, and I'm going to go all the way to selecting that and deleting it. I'm going to change my color to the fill of pink. I still have that. I'm going to grab an ellipse with the L tool and make a circle, and going to move that so it's nice and center for you. The next thing I'm going to do is show the next tool, which is the U tool, and that is the mesh tool. So before I click that or hit the U on my keyboard, I'm going to go back to my default colors. Actually, I will select off of my circle by holding down Command or Control on a PC, which brings up my selection tool. Remember that? And so I'll click off. I have nothing selected. Now I can grab my U tool, and that is my mesh tool. And then I'm going to hit D before I click anything with the mesh tool, and D will go back to default colors. And then I can start drawing my mesh on this object. And you see what happens immediately. It started to put a hue of white, which is my fill color. And that's because I had the default colors selected, and I clicked and made these crosshairs on the mesh tool, and I can make something very unique. U for unique. I can make a unique gradient, a unique mesh on the mesh tool, and that's one way you can remember it. U for unique, and it's a unique gradient. I mean, it's a gradient, but it's all sorts of got these different points. So U for unique gradient as the mesh tool. Now, it used to be called the gradient mesh tool. Now they just call it the mesh tool. So unique gradient for the mesh tool, and U is the shortcut key for it. Now the alternative would be the gradient tool, and I'm going to select this, delete it all, grab a new marquee tool, rectangle tool by hitting M. I'm going to make a box of this bluish color, and I'm going to grab my gradient tool, which is G for gradient, which is just great. So I'm going to do that, and how I use that is I make a gradient, but wait a minute, I don't have a gradient in that. So let me go over to my other tools on my panel, and I'll put a gradient fill, and then with my gradient tool I can change the points with precision and ease using that gradient tool. Okay, G for gradient. Hope that makes sense. Let's move on to the next one. The next tool is the eyedropper, and eyedropper is pretty easy. Think of eye, the part of your body, the eye, and how does that sound? It sounds like the letter I. You can't get any simpler than that. So before I do that, let's make another object. Let's this time go grab an ellipse and draw that here and change it to the default colors. And as you can see, now it's white with a black stroke. And so I'm going to grab the eyedropper, and that's hitting the I on the keyboard, and I want this circle now. I know it just had the gradient, and I just took it off, and I'm going to select the gradient, and now I have a gradient back in the circle, and that is how the eyedropper works. It'll work on stroke and fill, it'll work on text, and we'll discuss it in a lot of good depth later. The next tool is the measure tool. It doesn't have its own shortcut key, so we're going to skip it. And then we have the blend tool. So the blend tool, let's go back to the default colors on this circle first, and then let's move it down here, and then we'll grab this square and move it up here. And we'll go with the default colors on that too, but we will invert them. We will swap them, and that is Shift X. And how the blend tool works is to grab the W, which is the shortcut for it, and for that think of two V's is a double V, and it looks like a W. Or you can think of two U's, and we're blending them together to make a double U. So double the letter, making the letter W, and it's because it blends. It is a blend tool. So hopefully that makes some sense. I'm going to grab the blend tool, click these tool, and it will make this blend that goes from one to the other, and it blends the colors and the shapes, and there you go. So moving right along, we have the blend tool. The next tool is the symbol sprayer tool, and as you can see, the shortcut for that is Shift S. Look at that symbol. It is a can of spray paint. So think of people who do graffiti and really shouldn't. So how do they do their work? They usually do it during the night shifts. So Shift S, because that's when graffiti's done. I don't know. Think of something else. Or symbol sprayer has two S's, so Shift S, maybe. I don't know. Come up with your own. This is just how I remember it. Then the next one, again, so Shift S for the symbol sprayer. The next one is the charts. There's all sorts of charts. You've got the Creative Cloud Charts tool. You've got the Column Graph tool. Charts, 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 all you could ever need. And think of that with the J. And the reason that the hotkey is J is because in order to have a graph on the page, you really need a job to have it. There must be a job to put, you have some particular reason to be putting a chart in your artwork. So that is the way that I think of it. J for job, and sometimes putting together graphs and column charts and all that stuff it's kind of a job. So there you go. The Creative Cloud Charts tool is a J. The next one is the Artboard tool, and it is Shift O. And think of the Artboard has a big long O in it, a long O sound. So Artboard is Shift O, and hopefully that can help you. Or you can think of the Artboard as the layout area whereon you work, and so it's kind of overarching. It includes everything. Shift O for the Artboard. Okay, that's the Artboard tool. The next one is the Slice tool, Shift K, and maybe you can come up with a way to think of Shift K, because I could really not think of anything. I had one suggestion that when you get a strike, in baseball, it's right down the middle, and when you mark that on the score sheet, it is a K. So a big capital K, Shift K, because it cut right down the middle. However, let's think about what the Slice tool is used for. It's used for turning a piece of artwork, your artwork, into a series of slices, web-ready elements. And nope, I still don't have any way to prepare that for a Shift K. Just know and understand Shift K is the Slice tool, and that's what it is. That's your shortcut key for it. Shift K, Slice tool. Come up with something. Send me a good comment. Let me know what you think. The Hand tool obviously is an H, and H for hand, handy H, and there you go. And that will get you pretty far in life if you have some hands. And let me give you a hand. H for hand. Z for Zoom tool, and that's fairly easy. Z, Zoom. There's the only thing in this whole application that sounds like it needs to have a Z is the Zoom tool. So good job, Adobe. I really appreciate that one was fairly easy. Whereas, obviously some of them I've had some complaints about, but Z for Zoom tool. Let's keep it easy. All right, keep going down. These are tools. They may be color selection tools, but they are still valid and relevant. Let me get rid of this blend here and get something, and we'll show you what's going on. I'm going to make a square, and first I will hit the next tool, and this shortcut key is D. I've already mentioned it a few times, and let's go hover over that, and it is the default fill and stroke. And not so much a tool, but it's a shortcut key. It's on the toolbar, so we're talking about it today. All right, so hit the D key and watch what happens. I have it goes back to the default of white fill with a black stroke, and remember, default is D, so that's fairly easy. So whenever you need to get back to default colors, hit the D key, and there you go. And the next one is the swap colors, and so that would be swap fill and stroke, and that is Shift X. So for that, think of I don't like this, and so I'm going to exit out, but I'm going to switch. Or maybe you can look at the X has two opposite angled lines in it, and so when you use Shift X, you're changing to the opposite, maybe that way. But Shift S for the swap colors, and I'll show you what that does. It swaps the fill and stroke. So right now, black stroke, white fill. Shift X will give me black fill, white stroke, and back and back and back. So that's how that works. The next one relates to the active color. Now, as you look at it, it says fill or stroke. Click to activate X or fill. It doesn't say click to activate because it's active. So if I hit X, then the stroke has the X in it, and the fill says click to activate. So what you would do is obviously click X to activate one or the other, and I'll move my cursor out of the way, and X to get to the white fill, X to get to the black stroke, or whichever, whatever color I have in there. For example, if I swap colors with Shift X, now if I hit X, I'm going to go and have the active color as the fill. Active color as X, again, gets me to the stroke, fill, stroke. It's a toggle, go back and forth. Okay, hopefully that makes some sense. The reason this is important, let's say I have a unique color or something that I want to put rather than these default colors. Let me zoom out just now. So I'm all the way zoomed out, and you can see that I still have my black fill and white stroke on my square. I have the black fill as the selected, that's the one in front on my colors down there. And let me come up to my color palette, and you can see how we can switch back and forth and why it's important to switch back and forth and know which one we're using. So if I hit X, I now have the white stroke. X, again, the black fill. We discussed that. Now I can choose a green fill, and it's the active color is the fill, and so that is what changed on there on my square. If I hit X again, I didn't swap colors, I didn't change any colors, I just selected now the white stroke, so I can go through, give it like a red stroke, and now you can see that on my shape. You can see that in my color selection. So that is what we mean by active. When I click X again, I now have the green again as active. The X again will give me the red stroke as active. Does that make sense? I sure hope so. Scrolling or zooming back down to the toolbar, you can see that we have three other things here regarding color. And the first one is the color, the second one is the gradient, and the third one is none. So here's how this works. Whichever color is active, the fill or the stroke, in this case it's the stroke, whichever is active, that is what is going to receive the color treatment. And I'm not sure if this is the official verbiage. I've been using Photo or Illustrator for long enough. I don't so much pay attention to that, but this is how I think of it. So whichever is the color that I'm going to change to or use, you can see it is the shortcut key of the less than symbol. And how I remember it is it's the shortcut that looks like it's pointing over that way. It's the one over there. So it's the one on the left. And then that will tell you that it is a solid color. And this is important. Let's go click X to get the green. And so now you see that changed from the red stroke to the green box. And now it's the green fill, so it's a green solid color is what it says. And so if I chose that with my less than key, then I would know that I'm going to have that green fill as my color. Now the next one over, and this is how it's easy to change, the next one over is the gradient, correct? So that is the last gradient that I used, and in this case it's the default white to black gradient. Let me click that, and First, we'll show you that again is the gradient, and that means that is the shortcut key of the greater than. And how I remember that is gradient is greater than. It's more than one color, and so you use the gradient greater than shortcut key. I click that, and now my fill, only my fill, not my stroke, because my fill was active. My fill is a gradient, and it is the default gradient that was in that I had just previously used. So gradient greater than, color, that one over there. And I'll click that by hitting the less than key, and I can toggle through these. So gradient less than, or gradient greater than, color less than, and it's the last color I used. So gradient greater than, color, or color less than. Does that make sense? Okay, now here's the one, and this is the reason way back earlier in the video where I said Adobe had trouble, and that's because the / that we discussed is what looks like the line tool, but it's not, because the / is used for the color fill or stroke color of none. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's press it. The / as we look over here says none, and it's got this box with a line through it meaning no fill. So I click / my box now has no color fill in it. I could have gone back to the color of green and then switch X or select X to bring the stroke as the active color, hit none, and I lost my stroke. And we see that in the color selection. We also see that in the stroke of the object itself. And I go back to the color, and remember the color was red because that was the last color I used. By hitting the color, the less than, I can also change my stroke to a greater than gradient. And I'll click off of that so you can actually see it. And you kind of see that it's darker down here than lighter up here. So I select that object again. I can go no stroke, I can go gradient stroke, I can go back to that red color stroke, and that is what these color selectors do. I hope that makes sense. So the next one we will discuss is the drawing modes, and let me show you where they are. They are down here, also in this same area, and the shortcut for them is Shift D, as you see there. Shift D to switch modes. And let me show you our options. We can click and see our options. We have draw normal, which is basically stack on top. So draw in front. We can draw behind, and draw behind is behind each object. And then there's draw inside, and I've discussed those in my previous 1.3, I believe. So Shift D to shift our drawing modes, switch our modes, Shift D. Hopefully that will help you remember. Then there's the change screen mode, which is interesting because it changes between, as it says, normal screen, full screen mode with a menu bar, and full screen mode. Let me show you the differences between those. And so I have right now normal mode, and this is on a Mac. You may have a different appearance on your PC, and it hopefully doesn't look too different. So normal mode, I have now full screen mode with the menus, and then I have full screen mode without menus, and it also takes off any, it will leave on the rulers. So for example, if I have rulers on, you can see that. In full screen mode, if I take the rulers off, it's independent of this F key function. One thing, thank you Adobe for the update. However, I keep seeing this problem. If you look over on the upper right of my screen, you can see that my color panel and all of my panels have shifted. Every time I go to full screen mode and come back to normal mode, That's what it does. I don't know why. Looks like a bug to me. So in order to get it back, I have clicked the expand and then collapse, and then it seems to work okay. I did have one issue. Let me go back to it and show. I go F and then back to normal mode. As you see, it did it again. I did, however, drag my menu over, and then when I tried to open my palette, it went off the screen. Yeah, because I'm reversed. Anyway, so it went off the screen. I couldn't see anything. I had to go and move and do all sorts of stuff to get it back. Just know that this is the case with 2015. Hopefully they'll work this bug out and you can use your panels in the narrower mode like I'd rather do. So there's that, and that about covers it for the toolbar. And I hope that this was helpful for you to come up with a way to remember all of these tools. I will try to make sure that every time I mention a tool that I tell you the shortcut key for it. It may or may not be intuitive for you. Hopefully this will help make it a little bit more intuitive. And anytime I do a shortcut or a command or any options that include a shortcut key, that I mention them. That's my goal, because this is a beginning class and I want you to get in the habit of using the shortcut keys because they're so much useful. So anyway, thank you for watching this one, and the next week we'll begin our modules 2.1, and we're going to talk about shapes and lines and points. And eventually next week we will get into the finger dance. So thank you for watching, and I will enjoy seeing my students in class next week. And all of you, the rest of you watching, I hope you enjoy working with Adobe Illustrator Creative Cloud. And again, I'm using the 2015 version now, just released yesterday. And I hope to show all of the cool tools and features in Adobe Illustrator. And thank you for your time.